Welcome to Beyond the Surface. With me, Debbie Anne Turnbull. Here we dive deeper than the obvious to explore what really keeps our families safe and our minds strong. After losing my only son Chris to drowning, I've dedicated my life to water safety education and helping others heal. With many years of training and personal experience, I'm here to help you navigate your challenges, because the most important truths are found beyond the surface. Hi, we're going to do something different today because we all like a bit of change, don't we? So I've got my best friend, one of them. I've got Mr. Tom.
Hello, Debbie.
He has supported my work for so many years. He's done all my filming. We've been out in all weathers. We've been in Llandudno on the pier when it's been freezing. We've worked with a drone. We have done so many things. And I'm hoping you're going to really enjoy this conversation because this guy is brilliant. And he's a great podcast creator too. So over to you, Tom.
Well, thank you, Debbie. Gosh, I was trying to think when it was that we first started working together. I have a notion it was back in 2021, actually, which feels like simultaneously no time at all, but also a million years ago. And one of the things that we've talked a lot about over the years is how you communicate your message. So I thought, that it might be useful for me to ask you a few questions about how you've been a sort of a tireless communicator, getting your story out there and helping people with understanding the ways they can be safe for themselves and for their families around water. Because I think the sort of the communication angle of what of what charities and what people with missions do is one of those parts of it that can sort of go untold or underappreciated. And so I'm really interested to sort of get into that sort of into some of the details about that. But I've been in the world of video and communications for getting on for 26 years now, and a lot of that work has been with charities and with sort of third sector organizations, and we've more recently moved into podcast production. And there are lots of themes which run through all of this, but what I wanted to start off is by sort of asking you how, and some of the, so just for the viewers and listeners, none of these questions Debbie's prepared for at all. So, no. But I know that she knows the answers to them. So I'll be really interested to see, to hear these. These are questions I've sort of wanted to ask. So the first question is, and I suppose it's probably going in at sort of probably the hardest part. How do you take a story that is so personal and so powerful and potentially, difficult to tell? How do you get to a point where you can tell it without it being overwhelming?
Gosh. I started the week after the funeral. So it was week 3, basically. Wow. And I was called back into the school because in those days, don't forget, I mean, the mental health type problems, and that wasn't really out in the open at all. So Chris was so close to his mates. There were over 350 people at the funeral, and unusually enough, we were asked, could we have the do at the rugby club, which was quite a do, a bit of a do, shall we say, in that, quite honestly, the funeral was at 2:00 and we were still there at 5:00 the following morning because his mates just, I we just adored each other, you know. His nickname was Debs, and basically it was me who rallied them all here, there, and everywhere, and made sure they were all right. So that kind of relationship doesn't just go. It to me it expands. And I do remember when we'd had the funeral, within days of it all happening, I remember going into Asda in Llandudno shopping, and every single local newspaper had his picture on the front page. And I remember buying about 24 copies because it was just all I could do to contain myself to actually see that this is actually real. And so, as I say, I went back into the school, and the reception I got from the school was quite mixed. One of the teachers I remember came up to me and said, well, it's this is it now. We've got to get back to normal. And I said, well, what's normal? It's not it at all. You know, they were hysterical. His mates were absolutely hysterical. Some had flown home from holidays. They'd flown home, genuinely took extra flights to get home for the funeral. And I realised then that something really needed to be done. So it was then what we did, just to bring people together as a community of grieving kids, really, and some of the teachers in the school in particular. We did a fundraiser, and we walked from the top of Colwyn Bay right down to Ross-on-Sea. And I remember that second we started walking, the biggest rainbow you've ever seen appeared, and they've subsequently done so throughout. And we did that. We raised money, and we became a community that day, really. They had a song for him. There's only one Chris Turnbull, walking along, singing a song, walking in a Turnbull Wonderland. And as we got there, we sang all the way down. We had buckets. We raised money for the mountain rescue, and we bought them a river raft because they'd not got one. We then proceeded to buy them dry suits because they'd not got enough of those. And then we bought radio equipment, and then we just fundraised like crazy for lots of other things for the RNLI as well. And it was that point, as I say, that I went back into the school. I spoke to them, and I realised that something's got to give. And they weren't dealing with it really well at all. And so I had all his mates coming to the house, coming to see me in groups of like 15 sat in his little bedroom, you know, and I'm sat on the floor talking to them, thinking, what can we do? And I went to then, because of my background in sales and then marketing to press, working with the press, I called a press conference, and we had it at Police HQ in Colwyn Bay. And that's kind of where it began, because I saw myself just standing up and speaking in front of police, fire service, press officers. And again, it all went out in the press. And then I was getting phone calls from schools to say, will you come and talk to our kids? And we're not even in month 2. We're not even 6 weeks into it. So I suppose that became the catalyst for where we are now.
Yeah.
But I feel also that media and press and TV, as I say, I ended up on TV quite quickly. It all just it just was like a train. It was like an express train, and it's never really stopped.
No, I mean, you seem incredibly driven by the mission that you've got, and it, you know, in all the conversations we've had, that sense of purpose, that sense of purpose, and that sense of drive to help, and sort of, well, to put it bluntly, save lives, to stop other people dying in kind of those tragic and avoidable avoidable circumstances. It's just the hearing you talking that story about how it sort of very seemingly very naturally occurred, and did it feel like a sort of a step that was almost inevitable at that point to sort of
Definitely.
because when did you set up River and Sea Sense after that?
Even though I started going into schools, I for about 18 months or so afterwards, I kind of played at it, I suppose, but within I think when we got to about 2 years, that's when I officially set up River and Sea Sense. But I got my office and I was tentatively working towards it, and then we decided that this wasn't going to go anywhere. Not go anywhere, I mean.
Yeah.
And I just then set up as a non-profit as River and Sea Sense. And it was funny because I remember sitting in the office of the guy, Neil, at that time. And he said, I think you really need to get a website, Debbie. Well, what do I need a website for? He said, well, it doesn't look like you're going anywhere, Deb. So,
Yes.
Oh, blimey.
Yes.
And he said, well, I remember sitting there and he said, what are you going to call it, Debbie? And honestly, we know about Debbie's woo-woo. And I kid you not, straight down there, straight in my ear, River and Sea Sense came. And it was like somebody whispering it in my ear. And you know that I've had lots more whispers since then. But honestly, that was it. And off we went.
And when you got that sort of when it moved from being something kind of or I guess quite organic at first, and then you sort of formalized it and it became River and Sea Sense, what was it like to go to sort of make that move from something that felt like it sort of, I don't know, I'd like to say organic, it felt quite organic and a natural evolution of you talking about Chris and all the sort of to the schools and to sort of supporting those kids. When did that sort of sense of actually I've got an organization, what do I do now? Because I know you've had this goal to reach 1 million people. Was that a goal that evolved rapidly after that initial setup, or
No,
when did that come
no.
about?
I think, to be quite honest, I rang a funder called Unlimited. And honestly, I couldn't have spoken to anyone better at that time. And they were funders, and they were giving out 5k to set up a non-profit. So I had the conversation with them, and within, I think, 4 days, they were on the train coming to see me, and we met in the St George's Hotel in Llandudno.
Yes.
And I couldn't have had a more positive meeting in my life. And they supported me, not just as an agency, but personally. They were just amazing because they could see, they filled in all the gaps that I couldn't see when I went for that grant. Obviously I got it. And Mandy and Gareth, stayed with me for up until now. Really, I'm not as much in touch with Gareth because he's changed tack, but Mandy has been to awards with me. When we then applied for the lottery as one of the other small grants, and Mandy helped me and worked with me on that. And they were friends. They weren't like, so they were friends. They were real friends who were rooting for me. And I think it took a long time for me to believe in myself in a way that I could grow something like this as a mother who just lost a son. And I had all the other things going on with that, like the struggle with how my parents saw what I was doing, which was horrendous. And people saying, like, who are you to do this? Who are you, really? And that made me quite honestly even more determined, because that was like, I'm Christopher Turnbull's mum, and he was flipping amazing. You know, and it's been a massive, massive roller coaster. Even now, as you well know, Tom, we're going through stuff, but personally and professionally. But I get to that, what do they call it, the 11th hour, when I think all hope is lost, and then ping, a little miracle. So I'm waiting for one now, Chris. Bring it on today.
Yes.
As you know, we need one, but it's been an incredible journey. And the more that I learn, the more that my voice just became stronger and stronger. And the more media opportunities I got, I wasn't scared to get in touch with the press. Say, look, I've got a story for you. I want you to run this. And then I started getting awards, and hi, I've got another one. And then in the most beautiful way, one of Chris's mates was young lady, and her dad was a reporter for ITV Wales. So that's another ball that started to roll. And then the awards came in. Yeah, I went into schools and I've spoken to thousands and thousands of children. I will be honest, it wasn't easy, because when I was speaking to these children, especially the younger ones, I had little ones grabbing with their arms around my thighs, hugging me and won't let me go, and crying, and, you know, children crying in class. And then when I got awards and I got films and things of the awards and things like that, and they you know, we made some other films in schools, and the schools became part of the community as well. So it's become a movement, I suppose. And I think it leads me on, Tom, to the reason why I realise that I do need a podcast. And I'm so glad I'm with you, because otherwise I'd be missing out, I feel. And I think if we could work like we are doing, I'm hoping that we will get sponsorship and support for it. Because I do believe that this will save more lives, and the way you set it up. And I'm turning it back to you now and saying, Tom, tell us about how you set up your podcast company, because it's flipping amazing.
Well, that's very kind, and I think it's. I'll just speak to you first to your point you made about the the value of a podcast. So you've been sort of out there and driving this forward as yourself. So you've been physically going out and speaking to people, going to award events, you know, and that's, you know, it's incredible. But I imagine it's pretty tiring. I imagine that actually the sort of the getting out there and being sort of on, as it were, is kind of is not always easy. But I think with the sort of, from a communications point of view, communicating the stories and the things that are important to the widest audience has you know, things are shifting quite rapidly at the moment. Particularly, you know, we're seeing AI is everywhere. AI generated content is everywhere, and I think people are starting to develop a bit of, I guess, mistrust of some of the short content. So something like a podcast allows people with a message and a mission like you to have conversations that are important to the people that you want to reach, but also allows you to have more in-depth conversations, which perhaps kind of are going to reach people in different ways. And so, you know, there's some really exciting guests that you've got coming up on your podcast that are going to be able to reach different groups of people in different ways. I mean, you know, the podcast is very, you know, we set the podcast up very deliberately with every client, we start off with quite an in-depth strategy process where we get to the heart of what it is that you want to be saying, the people you want to be saying it to, getting really, really clear about all of that, and using that as the information to build out what the podcast is going to become. Now, podcasts aren't quick wins, but you are setting yourself up for success if you do all of that, and you have actually done that. You've got the clarity of message, you know who you're talking to very clearly, and it's just a case of putting the content together and getting it out to the right people. Now, the beauty of long conversations like this is that we get to, as we've done here today, we've covered lots of different topics, so there's lots of different pieces that can be pulled out of this podcast and turned into shorter bits, shorter clips for sharing with a wider audience in lots of different ways. And I've always seen, with Podforge, I've always seen the purpose of it not just to be about getting a podcast episode out every week. It's about the whole thing that builds around it. It's all that other associated content and reach that can come from it. And I think being clear about what the podcast is doing, is going to do for you and do for your mission right at the start, that is the building block of which everything else is sort of built.
I'm to be honest, Tom, what really surprised me, and you're the genius in this, but what really surprises me is that I've ended up with a business plan as well, which,
Well, yeah.
Blimey, who would
Yeah.
imagine that I've ended up with a kind of a business plan all running around that. And that was quite a shock, because that's really made me stretch my brain quite a lot. I've always had goals, but I've never really focused in the way that you've helped me to focus, which is genius to me, and I'm sure it will be to other people.
Well,
and
I really, yeah. No, I was just saying, I absolutely love hearing that, because that process that we go through at the start is as much about sense checking what's how we fit it, how the podcast fits into the business. And actually, it's not a one-way street. You've got to make sure that that there's alignment there, and you can't actually do that work unless you get really, really clear about the broader business goals and objectives. And I'm really pleased that process has been useful, because it's a part of the process I love as well.
I know, because you're a geek.
It's true.
But yeah, a good geek. It's been it took me, I'll be really honest, and as you know, Tom, not because of you, but because of me and the way my brain works, and I'm sure I'm a bit ADHD and all the rest of it. But it took me a while to really get it in, to really make it sink in. But then when I saw what I'd really got, and it was a time when I was quite poorly, if you remember, when we were doing all this planning.
Yes.
So my brain wasn't as good as it should be. I was really poorly. But blimey, when you get to a point when you've answered all the questions, it's all been fed into your amazing system. And then I come to work here one day and I think, sugar, look what I've got. I didn't really know I'd got all that. And then I remember messaging you saying, Tom, I've got a business plan. Crikey.
Good. I'm very pleased.
Where did that come from? And it's flipping genius, and I think, if I may say, Tom, you need to make a big point of that when you're promoting this work, because you must. You really, really must, because it is, I can't stop saying it's flipping genius. And it's not, to me, it's the additional time that you give as well. It's not like, oh, we've had an hour now, that's it. I'm grateful for the additional time and the support, both personally and professionally. And I think I appreciate that more than the genius work that you do, and people should know about that, Tom.
That's very, very kind. And
Sorry,
actually, lovely,
he's going
lovely.
pink. He's going pink.
I'm
No, but
very.
seriously,
Yeah.
it's true, and people need to know that, and that's why I wanted you to do this today, because it's necessary, Tom.
And you've been trying to get me to do it for a while, actually, but I've been sort
I
of going,
know.
oh no, you know, my tendency is to, you know, I'm,
Got yeah,
yeah, you got
got
me.
yeah,
Yeah, yes,
yeah.
you got me. And actually, you know, I don't shout about some of this stuff, but you know, I am lucky to work with a really, really great bunch of people, and
Mm,
um, the people that I work with are all sort of tied together by the fact that they are good, they are passionate, and they are dedicated to their missions. Now, their missions might be very, very different. You know, we've got
yeah.
we've got podcasts that are. You know, one of the other podcasts is called Shell's Spooky Stories, and that's about ghost stories and paranormal investigations. Couldn't be more different in some ways to some of the other podcasts. But Michelle is absolutely, you know, committed to her way in a you know, obviously a very different way to the way,
Mm,
you know, you are, you know, driven and committed. But I love working with people that have got uh, uh, a passion or a mission or both,
mm.
and you've got that in absolute bucket loads.
Thank you.
That's-
Oh, I don't like it. I don't like it when you do it.
yeah, yeah,
Back at you.
yeah, yeah. So I suppose, okay, what would be my last question to you? I would really like to know what is, okay, so two-part question. One, what was the most sort of what's the biggest audience you've spoken to?
Oh, Tom. In person, public speaking.
Yeah, because actually most people.
Camelot. It was
Camelot.
Camelot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many people were in that audience then?
There was about 600 in the room,
Yeah.
and then there was about 500 online.
Yeah. Wow.
It was their company conference, and it
Wow.
was an amazing, incredible honor. It was just, and it was actually quite fun
Yeah.
because I, even when I've gone into school, like the only thing I put down is, and I'm sure all the people who teach public speaking will be shouting from the ceiling, but I go in with a post-it note with about 8 words on it,
Good.
and I
Like
speak
that.
from my heart and soul. And I've done that for many, many years. I have done some training on public
Mm.
speaking since then, but it's still that same
Mm.
methodology for me, because
Yeah.
I walk into one of these situations. I'd spoken to the CEO, who had been with me when I won the National Lottery Special Achievement Award, and I spoke to the CEO briefly beforehand, and then they took me in the room, and you see it all, and you're going, shit, it's real. And there's a big stage there, and I'm thinking, oh my God, they've got me on a podium. I can't be doing with that. I remember just previously to that, I'd gone to I spoke at the National Drowning Prevention Conference in Ireland, in Southern Ireland, and there was a great big podium there. Now, at that particular one, I was with many people with PhDs and goodness knows what. They were all the speakers there. And the list of these speakers with all these letters after their name, because I hadn't got my MBE by then, I was pooping myself. And I thought, no, I've got to still do this thing that I do, because all they were doing, to be quite honest with you, by the time it got to me, which I was on the graveyard shift at 1 o'clock after lunch,
Mm.
people were sinking down the chairs because they were just reading off scripted productions on, and it was all, and honestly, it was so great for
Right.
them,
Yes.
great for them, but not for little me, because I found it really hard. So I thought, stuff this. So I
Yeah.
said, right, no podium. I got off the stage, went on the floor, and I bounced up and down the room and did my thing. And you know what happened at that one? There was the guy who was, I'm not going to say who he was actually, but this particular person was very powerful in water safety in Northern Ireland, very powerful. And what he did at the end of that day, he actually told his story for the first time.
Wow.
Amongst all those people who'd come from Australia and New Zealand and all over the place. And he broke down.
Yeah.
And because he said, he came up to me afterwards, he said, and because I saw you do what you did, I knew I could do it as well.
Yeah.
So, but going back to the one we did in Camelot, everyone sat down, and I said, I'm going to have a leg up on the stage. So I got my leg up on the stage, and that was okay. But I did my talk. I did it as I normally do it, and I thought I could feel the sense of, like, you can feel a penny drop in the room. I felt that atmosphere, and there was a lot of cameras at the time as well. But I thought, I'm going to turn this around. And so I told a few scary moment stories where I was like by the skin of my teeth on some of the things I'd had to do. And in the middle of it, I just went, thank God for tenor ladies. Sorry, Tom. But it just, the whole room kind of burst up. All the guys were like,
That's,
like old men laughing Parliament. And it was just
that's,
nuts. And then, I finished the talk, and I got an ovation. I got a standing ovation for
oh,
that. And it was just like, the CEO came back on again then. He said, Debbie, how you can speak like that and bring humour into such a terrible, terrible story
mm,
in the way that you did. He said, and he just said to me, we will never forget this. And it was the same. I did the National Drowning Conference. That wasn't a big number. There was about probably 300 in the room. But again, they were all the top people in the RNLI, the River RLSS, top people in the business, basically, and the fire service. I'd written a poem about 18 months in, and it was at the time where I was quite suicidal, and I'd written this poem about Chris, and it just felt right to recite it, so I did. And again, that actually resulted in our friend Tommy Richardson
yes.
coming to my event in
Yeah.
the summer,
Yeah.
and things are going to kind of grow from that. So, but I guess the biggest audience I had to speak to for 3 minutes was when I won the National Lottery Award, and Bear Grylls appeared out of nowhere to give me a big hug and a great big fat award. So
Oh,
that's on
wow.
national TV, wasn't it, on
Yes.
BBC? Blimey, oh gosh, I don't know where the words came from for that, but they did, and it worked.
Well, it's absolutely lovely to hear these stories, because it can sometimes feel like, when, like you say, when you're dealing with such kind of difficult subject matter, and there's been plenty of times where I've found myself getting quite emotional when we've been talking about your story and the work you do. It's nice to kind of find those points where you're, I suppose, this the pleasure, it's the wrong word, the sort of the power of reaching other people
Mm,
the power of that communication, when you can see rooms shift, when you can see your message
feel it.
landing.
I
And
felt it,
yeah,
you
and
know?
it's lovely to hear that side of that story, because I think it's, you know like you say, it's a strangely joyful thing to know that you are changing things in people for the better, despite being in places where you're talking about weighty and difficult matters.
Mm.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's probably a good place to put a little bow on that conversation. Thank you for
You,
sort of
Tom.
for bringing me in and giving me the sort of the floor to ask you some questions that I wanted to ask you before.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you everyone for watching. I'm sure you're going to get a little smile here and there, and that's what we need, isn't it, right now? I'm sure that our next session will be just as interesting, so I shall see you soon on Beyond the Surface. If today's conversation has connected with you in any way, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. To hear more powerful conversations like this one, like and subscribe. For practical resources from today's episode, please check out the details below, where you'll find free downloads, workshop information and ways that we can work together. If you're ready to take the next step in your family safety journey or your mental and spiritual well-being, I'd love to support you. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and remember, you have everything you need within you to protect what matters most.